Good morning. Today I'm going to talk to you about two things. First one is how I stopped believing in God and what brought me to that conclusion. The second one is on the afterlife and why I believe that there is an afterlife, or possibly is an afterlife, and about past life regressions. And I want to give you a theory about how this could be physically possible within anatomy. But before I start, if you like what you hear, please click subscribe, press like, make a comment if you'd like to, and also there's a little bell there. If you click the bell, you'll be reminded of any posts that I make in the future. I'm going to start my story at the end. I'm going to start my story when I was 54 and went to university. Went to university to study philosophy and creative writing. I did this because we'd been traveling for 3 years, living on a yacht for 1.5 years and traveling through Central and South America for another 1.5 years, just backpacking around, having fun. And I needed something to occupy my mind while I was doing this. So I started writing short stories. I started writing short stories about the Garifuna people in Honduras, about their fun way of life and their drug running and their beliefs. I wrote about the military dictatorship in Guatemala at that time, and how a young couple who were caught making love by the military, they chopped his head off, the boy's head off, cut the girl's stomach open and stuffed the head inside the girl's stomach, sewed it back up again, and how her mother came home and found them in that position. I wrote about the Tangueros in Buenos Aires. I wrote about the Inca Trail and a number of stories like that. And I found that I really enjoyed writing. When we'd finished our traveling, we opened a dance school in Sydney, on Australia. And only working during the night time, I found I had plenty of time during the day. So that was the reason for going to university. I'd never been to university before and just thought it might be interesting and to hone up my writing skills, seeing I enjoyed it so much. And philosophy seemed like a very snug fit for that course. Pardon me. One of the units that I took in philosophy was the philosophy of religion. And the very first question that was asked in that course by the tutor in one of the tutorials was, what does religion have to do with God? Now, when you think about it, it actually has nothing to do with God at all. Monotheists, people who believe in the one God, obviously say that God was the one that handed down the laws by which religion was formed. But in reality, religion is just a set of rules in which to live your life. The same as Buddhism or Hinduism or Taoism or Taoism. It's just a set of rules which show people how to live a good life and how to enjoy themselves. The only difference between that and the monotheist religion is the fact that the monotheist religions, Christianity, the Baptists, the Buddhists, the Jews, the Islam, they believe that these laws came from God, that they were handed down on stone tablets by some force that came from the clouds. This fictitious person up there who was all powerful, all good, and all knowing, which when you think about it is totally ridiculous, because it's impossible that anybody could be all those three things at the same time, simply because there is sin in the world. Now, people who believe in these religions say that God created sin to give us free will so that we can choose which path we would like to take. But that's a very spurious argument, because if he created sin, that he knew that many people would choose to take that path, which means that he's actually not benevolent anyway. So I started inquiring of people. I wanted to write a story about this, and I started inquiring of people in Macquarie University in Sydney it was, about whether Islam had a character similar to St. Peter, who was supposed to guard the gates of heaven and give permission or not for people to enter heaven. I wound up asking 29 people before I could get an answer. Many people, and as I say, these people were Islamic believers. You could tell that because I was only asking the ladies, they all wore hijabs, walking around the campus. So that's how I knew who to approach. There was one middle-aged lady I spoke to, and many of them said that they would find out for me and get back to me, but they never did. One middle-aged lady did say she would get back to me and did keep her promise. And we sat and had a cup of coffee. And she explained to me about the path over the Great Divide and Armageddon, and how what the Islam religion actually teaches. Won't go into it, it's not all that important at this stage. But when I asked her why she followed the Islamic religion, because she was actually Turkish, and she said she was brought up in an atheist family. She told me that one day she just felt like she needed to believe in something, and she was going to become a Christian. But Christians wanted her to undergo a ceremony, and she wasn't prepared to do that. So she decided to choose Islam. Except for some of the fundamental beliefs of both of these systems, they are reasonably similar, although their believers might not say so. And she said to me she chose Islam just because she felt she needed to fulfill something in her life. To me, I said to her, isn't that really like throwing a dart in a dartboard and saying, well, I'll choose that religion because it fits what I want to believe? And she didn't really argue back about that, but it made me think a lot more. I had another strange experience in a backpackers hostel in Manila one time, Friendly's Guest House it was called. It certainly was not the cleanest place in the world. It was certainly not the most comfortable place in the world. The rooms were pokey small. They didn't keep it very clean at all. But it was very, very friendly. It had a massive big balcony that people could sit out on and chat and talk. And the owner, I can't remember what his name was now, every Friday and Saturday night he'd put on free drinks and free food for everybody. And he was a wonderful character. But there was an Englishman there who I got to know quite well. He was studying Islam. Every time I saw him, he had the Quran out and he was studying Islam. And I said to him, why are you studying Islam? And he said, because I need a religion to believe in, and this is the word of God. And I said to him, well, how do you know this? And he said, because it was printed verbatim from when God spoke to Muhammad. Now, anybody who reads the history books knows that that's actually not true, but that's what they preach, and that's what people actually believe in. But again, I found that believers all need a reason to believe in what they choose to believe in. His reason came in dentistry. It turned out that what happened was that when he was very young, he had a lot of fillings in his teeth, and they were all mercury fillings. And they started bleeding when he was about 25 or 27, something like that. They started bleeding and dripping mercury into his system. Mercury is a very dangerous thing to have too much in your system. It can cause brain damage, kidney damage, neurological disorders, gastronomical disorders, cause Alzheimer's later on in life. And as he was telling me this, he repeatedly said, he said, I'm lucky to be alive. I'm here to get all my mercury removed and replaced with amalgam. And he repeatedly said, I'm lucky to be alive. The fact that he believed this so much, that he was lucky to be alive, led me to an understanding that it wasn't religion at all that he wanted, or that he was looking for. What he was looking for was a reason, some reason that he should be alive and other people shouldn't be. Another case happened in a hotel in Baguio. I was sitting in the cafe of the hotel one night, quite late at night, about 11 o'clock at night, and I was working on my computer, and there was another man sitting off on another table, and we were the only ones in the cafe. And it just so happened that I closed my computer about the same time that he stopped reading. So before we went to bed, we were conversing for a while. And I don't remember exactly how, but the conversation came around to religion. And I was asking him, these questions, because he seemed quite knowledgeable about religion, Christian religion. And I was asking him about these questions, but it turned out that the more I asked, the less he could answer. About where it all came from, how it came about, what the fundamentals were, and he couldn't answer this. Right? And in the end, he got so aggravated that he got up and stormed off, and in quite a huff. Well, I didn't realize until the next day that he was actually a priest, because the night that we were talking, he didn't have his dog collar on, but the next day he was going out to give a sermon, and so he had his dog collar on, and I just said hello to him, and that was all. But it struck me as incredible that somebody who was a priest knew so little about the actual history of their own religion, which led me to understand that when you learn about something like religion, you start off with one major premise, and the major premise is that there is a God. Right? Nobody questions that fact. They start off with the premise, there is a God, and everything stems from there. And from there, all they teach you is what is written in the Bible, as though it is verbatim truth. There is nothing else, no other truth available. Of course, we know that there's a lot of historical truth available. None of this is explaining to you how I came to be a non-believer in religion, because that happened many, many years before. That happened when I was actually 17. I didn't have a very good childhood. My parents split up when I was very young. We were very poor, didn't have a lot to eat. I was the oldest of innumerable children, it seemed. Every year a new one seemed to come along, even after my father left. And I always questioned in the back of my mind, because I was taught at a Christian school, if there is a God, and if he is so good, why does he let things like this happen to young children? Of course, an atheist would say, so that they can come to an understanding themselves about the truth of God. Didn't really sit very well with me, but after some years I went to sea. When I was 15, I ran away to sea. And the night I stopped believing in God is as clear to me today as it was then. I was on a ship running between South America and New Zealand. We used to run between Lima in Peru We'd go through the canal, Panama Canal, go to Venezuela. Used to go to Barbados to pick up some oil and then come back and go into Auckland, Wellington, and Timaru in New Zealand, and then just repeat the trip over and over again. One day we were sailing across the Pacific, or I should say one night we were sailing across the Pacific, and I was on lookout. When you're on lookout, you tend to do 8 hours on, 8 hours off. So the ships run from like 8 o'clock at night till 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock till 12 noon, 12 noon till 8 o'clock. And during the day, and you do a hour about. There was always 2 people on shift, one on the bridge and the other one. At night time, they'd just be sitting in the recreation room. In the daytime, you actually had to work between the hours of 9 and 5. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was just one of those superb nights. The sea was so calm, there was not a ripple on the ocean. There was no sound whatsoever except the boat passing across the sea, parting the waves, parting the water, creating a little bit of bow motion. Tiny little bit of wind created by the passing of the boat. And there was not a moon in the sky. The moon had not come up, which meant that the stars were brilliant. They were totally brilliant. You could see the Milky Way. You could see everything, the Southern Cross, Orion, the Crab, everything. And I was just walking up and down the deck. This is at the age of 17, remember. And I looked up at the sky, and it just crossed my mind that there is no one entity that could possibly be great enough to control everything in the universe or the cosmos. That, as I learned later on, there's something like 30 million universes that we know of, and something like 30 million stars or planets in each universe. Mind-boggling, totally mind-boggling. And at that moment, I just stopped believing. Now, my own reasoning told me that I was wrong, that the fact that there was something so big did not mean that there was something that could not control it. And I used the analogy of an ant. If you have an ant crawling around your yard at home, an ant could not conceive of crossing the oceans. It could not conceive of Europe or the Americas or the islands or the Pacific. It would just be too large for it. If it had thought, it would not be able to cope with that. So I knew myself that my own reasoning was wrong. Later on, when I was doing philosophy, Immanuel Kant explained it in a different way. Not personally, of course, only through the books. We were doing the philosophy of beauty. We were studying the philosophy of beauty. And we got to the word sublime. How does beauty go beyond being beautiful and become totally sublime? And Immanuel Kant explained it in 2 ways. He said there is the dynamic sublime, whereby, let's say you're sitting in a mountain in the Andes or, at the foot of the Alps, and you look across this terrain and you see the snow and the mountains and the valleys and the glaciers, and your mind just breaks down and says, this is just so beautiful that there must have been some designer or some creator or something brought this into being that is totally beyond my comprehension. And your mind just breaks down and you feel the insignificance of your own being. The second interpretation of the sublime by Immanuel Kant was on the numerical sublime. And he said sometimes when you look at the stars, or you look at, let's say these days, a computer, and the number of calculations it could make, the number of stars that are in the sky, it is beyond comprehension. You cannot understand, the mind cannot take in that there could possibly be such a number as this. So it was many, many years later before I got an explanation of why my mind broke down at that time, at the age of 17, on that sublime night, that perfect night where it transcended beauty and everything just became so peaceful and so wonderful and so connected to everything else. And I just stopped believing in such a concept of God. But my mind didn't stop working. It carried on, thinking about different religions. I've traveled to more than 70 countries of the world now, and I don't mean visiting them for a 2-week holiday. I've spent about approximately a year in India, quite a number of months in England. Whenever I've traveled, I've normally spent a fair bit of time in each of these countries. So I've got to know the countries and the people and their beliefs more than just taking a 2-week holiday and lying on the beach. And I love talking about their religions, discovering what makes them believe what they do. The most interesting religion that I have ever come across is a branch of Hinduism called Sikhism. Sikhism is a belief by the Sikh people in the northwest of India, up by the Pakistan border. And they believe in reincarnation, as the Indians do. But they believe in atomic reincarnation. Now I'm going to stop today's post here, because now we're going to enter into a whole new realm of looking into the supernatural and how the supernatural could actually be real. How somebody like Brian Weiss, who is a hypnotist and a psychotherapist in America, who totally believes in past life regressions, could come to this. And I want to give you an answer of how it is actually possible. So I'm going to stop here. Please, if you have liked what I've said so far, subscribe, like, make a comment if you will, and press the little bell to get a reminder of any future posts. And I'll be back with you shortly to explain how we could possibly have an answer to the supernatural. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.